I had to reinvent myself in terms of how would I execute a campaign that I call performance marketing. It was both shocking and also intriguing in terms of how much I had to learn on the anatomy side because of healthcare and also because of how regulated this space was.
That's Michel Montenegro, Global Digital Lead and Content Operations Manager for one of the world's largest medical device manufacturers. Michel spent more than 20 years mastering integrated marketing and communications for the likes of Procter Gamble, Unilever, and Kimberly-Clark. But in the middle of COVID, he made a big career move, leaving the relatively unconstrained world of CPG performance marketing for the highly regulated world of medical device manufacturing. The transition was eye-opening. Michel went from straightforward execution of performance marketing campaigns to navigating complex approval processes through clinical, regulatory, legal, and market access teams. The constraint forced him to become a fundamentally better marketer, more detailed, more attuned to customer needs, more focused on becoming an effective partner throughout the entire patient journey. We had a great conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. You won't want to miss this episode of The Digital Clinic. You have a fascinating background. You started on the CPG side, and not just on the CPG side, you worked for three of the most globally recognized brands in the world: Kimberly-Clark, Unilever, and Procter & Gamble. What led you from a very long, very successful career there to working for one of the largest medical device manufacturers in the world?
I already had 20 years of experience in CPG, and I thought that trying other industries would be interesting. In the middle of COVID, there were two industries that were growing. One was technology, and the second one was healthcare. And the company I work for is a technology company in the
Right.
healthcare industry. So I thought it was a good transition during COVID.
Very different environments. CPG, relative to medical device manufacturing or healthcare marketing, is relatively unconstrained. As you shifted into working for a medical device manufacturer, what, if any, adjustments did you need to make to your thinking and the degrees of freedom that you had as a marketer?
It was both shocking and also intriguing in terms of how much I had to learn on the anatomy side because of healthcare and the medical therapies and specialties, but also because of how regulated this space was. So understanding the approval process through clinical, regulatory, legal, market access teams before getting anything out there. I had to reinvent myself in terms of how would I execute a campaign that I call performance marketing, usually having changes on a daily basis, having to go through all this bureaucratic process of getting everything pre-approved. So what I learned was that there was a way. I would put a lot of pressure on these teams by getting them to approve and having them to go through hundreds of collateral assets, ads that they could approve prior to executing the campaign. When we optimized based on performance, we already had all those versions pre-approved, right? Having different backgrounds, fonts, call to actions, creatives, static versus motion, video, AI, avatars versus real people being interviewed. So being agile in getting all those different copies approved and then executing in so many different ways, but having all that, let's say, data bank of assets approved so that we could play with that during the campaign.
Right. So when you start with a base campaign, you're starting with version A, the launch version of these assets. How many alternate versions do you have banked or available so that you can iteratively test and continue to drive performance when you launch the campaign?
At least 20 versions where the versions are not very different between each other, but they are alternatives in terms of call to actions and how you mix creative versus copy and all those different iterations of the same ad.
What is the purview of your current role? You reference performance marketing. I know that you have deep, deep expertise in content strategy, content marketing, and brand strategy. What's your scope in your current role?
I'm a global digital marketer. I mostly execute in the US, but I'm part of a global team where we leverage our work and campaigns so that they can be leveraged in different regions. So when it comes to digital marketing, it's everything from strategizing in terms of identifying channels, recommending strategies, all the way to producing the assets and executing the campaigns, measuring, analyzing, and recommending optimization for those campaigns.
Are you focused on a particular medical device or vertical or condition, or is your span of influence across the entire suite of devices and conditions that your current employer serves?
The company I work for is huge, so it's just one of the operating units within the company.
As you shifted from CPG, and I think what I would say is a very well understood and broadly capable performance marketing framework, inclusive of right up to audience targeting, optimization, and performance reporting, into medical device manufacturing, which is more constrained. Did you find that uh, you had to change your thinking about the data available to you as you developed strategy? And have you had to adapt in the way that you report on performance and optimize your campaigns as well?
Because of privacy constraints, there's a lot of adaptation in terms of the kind of data that we have access to and how we can learn from campaign performance. It's more generic, I would say, so that you can execute more on behavior rather than on demographics, for example.
Right.
The other big adaptation has been in creative, right? Like how much out of the box can you recommend, and then actually putting yourself on your audience's shoes so that whatever you do is not only relevant to your brands and company and products, but also, and I would say mainly, to their needs, right? So what is relevant to them? What are we talking about when it comes to thought leadership? How relevant and how much are we meeting our audience needs when it comes to content so that it's actually being consumed, it's grabbing attention, it's being used in a way that is relevant to them, and then we are ultimately meeting our digital marketing KPIs.
I know that you have a very successful past in CPG, so taking nothing away from that. But I'm curious to know whether in shifting to marketing medical devices, that constraint that you just described, that you feel that you've had to become a better marketer, more attuned to the customer base and their needs than you were in a CPG context.
I would say I am a much more detailed marketer nowadays in terms of paying attention to nuances, things that might have been overseen by marketers in the past when it comes to understanding value propositions, features, and benefits, but also understanding what have been barriers in the past that we can overcome through our campaigns and by our campaigns in terms of content, copy specifically, but also tools that they can use. Usually, marketers think about video, images, copy in general, and you're thinking about channels such as email and maybe LinkedIn. But what about apps? What about software that can make their lives easier at a operating room when the support team, clinical specialists, and sales reps are in the OR with the HCP and they don't have a Wi-Fi signal, for example? How do they access this support asset that can overcome issues in the middle of the surgery, right? So it's actually being there when and where they need us so that we can overcome those barriers. It's not just about promoting our products before. The question is, how do you become relevant to them, not only before, but also during, so that they understand that you are an effective and efficient partner throughout the whole process and not just before you started promoting your products and you met your objective in terms of selling what you wanted to sell, but then what happens after? And that becomes the loyalty aspect of the funnel, where you create retention and you create trust and you create loyalty, right?
You've mentioned content strategy and brand strategy several times. I know that's an area of deep expertise for you. How do you think about and employ content strategy in the context of medical device manufacturing?
There's a big barrier at the beginning because of your lack of knowledge of the industry, but then also about the therapy and then your products and the anatomy, and what are actually the barriers that you need to help your HCPs to overcome. So that's a learning curve. After you go through that learning curve, you start understanding what's really relevant to them and then offering content that is actually overcoming those barriers. So there's a delicate aspect of this learning curve where you need to rely a lot on product marketers before you really understand what they need and how you can help them with that kind of content. But then, what kind of questions do you ask your product marketers so that you can identify those faster through them and then help them achieve their business objectives?
You talked about creative and development of 20 creative alternates for any base creative or base asset when you launch a campaign. AI, of course, is more than in the zeitgeist. It's, occupying a non-trivial part of every marketer's brain at this point. How are you thinking about and using AI for content strategy? And then I'm also curious to know whether you're using it for creative variation as well.
Yes, and something I've learned in the past few weeks is how much better can an avatar video perform versus a real video interview
Oh, really?
where, yes, I was so shocked to see. Of course, we tested static moving ads, video ads, but then we also recorded a real doctor interviews, and we had variation of avatar videos all using the same copy, and slight variations of female avatars versus male avatars, backgrounds, copy variations. But then how much better one avatar video performed versus the other and versus real videos was shocking to me, because you always have that doubt about, will people perceive this as real? And I don't think that's the relevant question to ask.
Mhm.
Is more about whether the content information that you are sharing is credible, and what is making it credible. Because when the copy is the same and you're just making variations in terms of who is delivering the message, it's what's making the difference. This is eye opening because it's not only about the what, but the how you're delivering what's making the difference.
Can you give us a sense for how much better the avatar video performed?
5, 8 times better. We made weekly rounds of variations to have enough data to make a decision before changing something, right? 5 rounds, 5 weeks of making changes to videos, starting with a set of 3 videos where we had real people versus avatar videos being compared, and then making slight variations and optimizing on a weekly basis. The winner, let's call it the winning asset, was performing up to 8 times better than the initial round of videos.
That's incredible. What platform, what technology did you use for the avatar driven videos?
I'm working with an agency that has the software. I'm not sure what the software is that they're using for creating these videos, but I wouldn't say it's like a very costly platform that if you don't have
Right.
that one specifically, it wouldn't perform. Any avatar video technology that is currently available would help you achieve this performance and this optimization.
We have also been tracking AI around development of creative content and, in particular, creative variation for optimization purposes for the last 18 months or so, and started by trying to build something ourselves and decided very quickly that was a fool's errand, and ended up deciding waiting for other platforms and other major players to evolve and improve was probably the wise thing. And it's been incredible to see the profound improvement in the quality of visual assets that you can develop from even the most commonly available visual platforms?
I would say there's also things that people need to consider that are not only related to the technology and how real or not the avatar comes across, but it's also about the attention grabbing at the beginning of the video. But then how much more dynamic do you make this after a few seconds? So it's not just a video of somebody talking at you for 3 minutes. It's attention grabbing at the beginning, couple of seconds, and then how do you go from there and how you transition into the actual content which is relevant to your audience. It might be a website, it might be a paper, it might be a clinical study, research, etc. So you jump into relevant content right away. It's not only about the creative, it's about the content. So how do you mix and how do you play with those different aspects of a piece like that so that people will stay and watch the whole thing versus, oh, how interesting this is, and then they jump off 5 seconds after.
Yeah. And of course, you have so much more freedom to make those adjustments in an avatar driven video than you do if you've shot live action video.
Exactly. And after you have copy approved, it's so easy, right? Because you have some freedom within these guardrails. We can switch words. You can start with a different paragraph. You can go straight to the meat of the value proposition instead of having long introductory pieces where people need to wait until they get what's really valuable to them. So that might make a difference. So just playing around with call to actions and different information and how you organize the information within that frame of reference.
Your focus while working on CPG, you developed a clear understanding, a deep understanding for the power of storytelling, of narrative in connecting with an audience, with your consumers, drawing them in, and then helping them through the conversion process. And you've brought the same thing to healthcare marketing. Talk with me a little bit about how you approach marketing through the lens of storytelling and why that has worked well for you.
I love that question because storytelling has been here for centuries, right? The way we execute is different because of how much less attention and how much less patience people have in terms of watching a whole story of, a 2 hour episode of a movie versus, scrolling after 2 or 3 seconds of just watching something and deciding that it's not relevant. So how you structure the story is different because if you don't deliver value the first 3 seconds, people will just scroll and change to the next topic.
You talked about AI and its use for visual assets. How about the use of AI for content creation or written assets? Are you using it there as well?
Yes, and I think AI can be very helpful and valuable when it comes to ideating, brainstorming, kicking off ideas, kind of double clicking on topics that you already have brainstormed or come up with so that it can give you more depth sometimes. It can give you more breadth. I think AI is interesting and relevant
Hmm.
by shortening the creative process. The other way I've seen it used, and I've used it myself, is for creating variation of creatives, for example, with Adobe Express or all these other tools that we now have, where AI is a critical component for developing assets where you already have the main message approved and you have call to actions. And then what you change is background, contrast, font, size. You can play with so many aspects of the creative by just having three or five variations of things that you have to say and have been approved to be said.
Would you start with a framework, maybe a series of messaging points, and actually use AI to draft content?
I've done it that way for email copy, for example, where I have just the main idea of what I want to say, and then I see it drafted in different ways, and I can just pick and choose from there. You can also do it when you don't have the actual idea and you are just brainstorming, for example.
Yeah, it can be a very effective muse or foil for ideation. Obviously, we're also focused on healthcare marketing. We have chosen to stop short of drafting content that is published, but we certainly will use it as that foil to develop ideas, to spider out with idea variations, maybe to develop content frameworks, and then have a human being complete a final draft. So in healthcare, trust is sacrosanct, and the credibility of the information that your audience sees is so fundamental to developing a relationship with them. And where content quite often is an initial touch point, a top funnel touch point. How do you reconcile the need to develop trust with the use of AI? How do you use AI in a way that continues to reinforce trust?
So it depends on when and how you use it, but definitely when you have a piece of content where AI have been leveraged, you need to be very upfront by saying what was the role of AI in developing that piece of content. When it's for internal purposes where there's so many other processes where you're just leveraging the tool for drafting, ideating, brainstorming, etc., where you don't need to disclaim it because it's not part of the end result, let's
Right.
call it, then there's no need. So, but I would say that because trust is so critical and so relevant, the transparency and how much upfront you are and candid you are in terms of revealing and disclaiming when and where and how AI has been used, the better.
When you think about content strategy and leveraging content to drive performance, is your purview only the content that exists within a campaign or on your website, or does it also extend to optimization for prominence and presence in LLMs and the like?
I would say both. When it comes to developing creative, it's easy to use, it's fast in helping you create variations, and that's where we see the most value. When it comes to research, when it comes to clinical papers, etc., we don't use it. The data, the source, who said what is so critical that we don't risk the intervention of LLMs or AI tools in those kind of critical content pieces where those papers need to be 100% sourced from whoever did the research, whoever performed whatever was performed in a data collection. We don't have the intervention whatsoever of AI during those.
As you develop and produce and promote content, how do you think about ensuring that the content you create is frequently and prominently cited in LLMs themselves? How do you win share of voice in LLMs?
There's a way of creating AI agents where everything that is developed is based on documents and papers that you use to train the agent and feed the AI tool so that things that come out are mostly, and you can never contain that 100%, but are mostly focused on whatever you're feeding the AI. It can always go rogue and start hallucinating. And that's where the editing, the review, and the post approval by legal, regulatory, and clinical teams is so important because that's when you make sure that everything that you're offering as an end piece has been filtered with all those expert eyes, right? You've done the quality assurance of the whole process.
After spending so many years in CPG and shifting to healthcare marketing, what's one of the most surprising things that you have experienced? What's the big surprise in making that shift?
There's been pleasant and not so pleasant surprises.
I was going to ask both sides, so it's perfect.
The not so pleasant is the agility and the creative aspect of campaign development. The pleasant side, I would say, is, and I would say rewarding, is how much of an impact can you make when it comes to patients' quality of life, enabling surgeons and HCPs to do a better job because of the technology that you provide, the information that you provide, and the things that you share. It's always through them, right? So everything we do is for them, ultimately with the same objective, which is improving patient outcomes.
I think everybody wants to feel that their work has meaning and impact. There are some industries where that's less clear than others, and maybe you have to do more mental gymnastics to convince yourself of that. But I share your perspective that this is one where Every day, if you're paying attention to the people you're serving and the people you're reaching and the value being delivered, it's absolutely clear that the work has meaning.
And we have company events where everything is about patient stories and testimonials. And when you see the impact of the work that you do, that's when you feel so rewarded, I would say, in terms of the meaning and realizing the meaning and the relevance of the work.
Well, thank you for doing the work that you do. I think that's a great place to leave this. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much for your time.